Hi, everyone. So, my person of interest for this week is William Hartsfield. And you might have heard of that name before because you may have possibly traveled through the airport that's named after him in Atlanta. And, besides just obviously having an airport named after you, you want to look at, okay, well, who is this person? And when, obviously, did they become influential enough to have one of the busiest airports, actually the busiest at some points, airport in the country named after them? And so, I wanted to look at his life and looking at it, you kind of he kind of has a rags to riches story. He began with very humble beginnings. He wasn't, he didn't come from a rich family, and he was born in the late 1890s. Obviously, that was a hard time for Georgia trying to come out of the Civil War. But even as early when he started his mayoral run and won to become mayor of Atlanta, he had this vision for the city that was just amazing, considering that he had no idea how it was going to turn out, but he could tell that air travel in particular was going to be revolutionary. And so, as early as the 1920s, he actually used the city's money and bought what was a racetrack and turned it into a airfield, and it was called Candler Airfield. It was relatively small. It was used to like carry mail and things like that, small transports. But he felt like that, eventually it would grow, and that eventually, if you were the first on the block to have these things, that eventually you would grow as a city. And so he was correct. World War II happens, obviously, and after World War II, air travel becomes the way of the world. Essentially, people want a faster way to transport. They want a faster way to travel, and with Atlanta already having that airport established, it is easier for them to expand. And so Hartfield's he invests more money into air travel. He expands the runways, he expands the infrastructure of the airport itself, and he makes sure that it's ready to take on the load of people that are going to be coming through that airport. And so those early adaptations really help once it starts, really flowing. And Atlanta quickly becomes the hub for air travel. And so eventually it turns into, obviously now Atlanta is like the number one airport as far as busyness in the entire country. And he knew a lot of that. He knew that he could see before it happened a lot of those things happening. And because of that, it has essentially helped Atlanta become one of the largest cities in the entire country and thriving economically, because over 600,000 tons of cargo goes through Atlanta every year, and that's not including the over 100 million passengers that go through Atlanta. I mean, Delta Airlines themselves is headquarters out of Atlanta's airport, and that's all due to the knowledge and the vision of Hartfield's. And it's kind of amazing that he could see all of this before it happened, because at the time, understand, we didn't know as a country how air travel was going to take off. We didn't know that it was going to become as successful as it did. And so for him to have already had those ideas and start putting those things into place, obviously that was, very influential. And I will say, how do we know this? How do we know that he didn't happen to get lucky? Well, if you read a lot of the newspapers at the time in Atlanta, you can see that he was doing a lot of expansion projects. He was doing a lot of work intentionally, and he gave speeches on this topic. He gave speeches on the idea that air travel was going to be the next, revolution in transportation, and he was correct. And I will also say that when you look at a lot of the city records of where he was putting most of his money, you can see that, whether or not you believe that he just got lucky on the fact that aviation became the next big thing after World War II or not, he truly did believe it. He put a lot of the city's finances into aviation. He believed that if they could be the leader in aviation, that essentially they could be a leader in the nation as far as their economy as a whole. Because if you look, a lot of the success that Atlanta has in the late 60s, early 70s, with a lot of the sports teams that come to Atlanta, and a lot of the different tourist destinations that come to Atlanta, and eventually resulting in the 1990s, getting the Olympics. All of those things were things that were established because of the foresight that he had when it came to transportation. And so this is an example of someone who might not be well known. He might not be a household name, but this man alone, through his guidance and through his work in City Hall, and also through his work with civil rights and making sure that that he moved away from the discrimination and the racial issues that Atlanta was facing before him. He was able to, adapt and essentially place Atlanta in a better position for the future. And it takes a special kind of leader to be able to see the economy and see where it might be going and make those predictions correctly. And he did. And I also say, considering the racial issues that he had at the time, it was amazing what he was able to accomplish when it came to essentially getting the rich, well-off white business owners in Atlanta to work with the influential community builders of the African American community to come together for these projects and to be able to overcome their issues and to start to be able to bridge that gap. Because Atlanta, once we get to the civil rights movement, they are at the forefront of this movement, and a lot of that was spearheaded by Hartsfield himself, and so I will say he was a very influential individual, and I would suggest that you highly look into him some more if you have the time. So I appreciate it, and if you have any more questions, drop them down below. Thank you.